Hello. Our story begins inside the Jedi Temple. All was quiet until the troopers of the 501st Legion marched through the gates of the temple. No one was prepared for this moment, and when it came, they didn't rise to the challenge. The temple was full of Jedi that had little to no time as warriors on the front lines. Most of them were just simple Jedi, ones who practiced the code and instructed. While they knew how to fight and how to wield a lightsaber, they actively avoided conflict. They didn't seek aggression, and they were stationed inside the temple throughout the war to avoid the tragedy of battle. When one of the most elite divisions in the Grand Army of the Republic showed up to the temple, none of them were ready. Anakin's Legion marched through the gates and crushed the little resistance that stood. The first to go were Sindralik and his 2 students, all 3 killed by Darth Vader. With the temple battlemaster dead, the rest of the Jedi were left defenseless and unprepared. Had Sindralik survived, he may have been able to rally a counterattack, or just about anything to help the Jedi out of this predicament. But he was gone, and the clones spread like wildfire throughout the temple. Nothing could reduce the flame to embers. As the clones did their duty, the future Grand Inquisitor did his by cutting off the Jedi Temple guards from the rest of the temple. He was one of the most skilled in his unit, and his surprise attack left his brothers and sisters unprepared, costing each of them their lives. Skywalker marched through the temple. He had broken off from most of his troopers to cut down anyone who was trying to flee. It was sort of ironic to him. He watched all of them run to him as if he could help them. In his own mind, it just sort of felt just, because they didn't help him when he needed it, and now he was killing them when they needed him. It obviously wasn't just, but he was just marching to the temple with no regard for anyone else in the galaxy aside from Padme across the city, though not even she was in the trap of his mind at the moment. His blade was swift, and those who tried to defend themselves from him were outmatched. He cut through knights and masters all the same. It was horrendous. Not many saw him coming. The sheer confusion of blaster fire and the fact that he was Anakin Skywalker threw them off. If they knew he was acting against them, then perhaps they could mount up, but there was none of that. The death of Sindralik was costly for the temple, and as each second passed by, it cost the lives of several more Jedi. An order of 10,000 was supposed to be reduced by hundreds, and then soon to be thousands. This was carried on across the galaxy as Skywalker massacred those unprepared for his turn. With everything seemingly coming together, Vader made his way to the council hallway, where each council member had their quarters to call their own. There was one Jedi on the council he was concerned about, and that was Shakti. She didn't even notice. She was in a deep meditation. She had earlier in the day locked onto the Dark Lord of the Sith, or so she thought she had, and so she was probing for the Sith Lord. Her hopes were to identify the Sith before the war came to an end. The travesty is, as Skywalker entered her room, she saw Palpatine's face in her vision. She was driven away from her focus, feeling Anakin's presence barge into her room, as she called his name, wondering why he walked in without her permission. His lightsabers met into her back before she could get a proper response. Anakin stormed back out of the room and avoided the firefights raging throughout the Great Hall of the Jedi Temple. Statues were blown over and Jedi were routing, trying to figure out where their young were and trying to protect each other from the unexpected assault. The dark side was so blinding. They'd been present for months, even years, but nothing like this. It felt like the Sith Lord was actively inside their temple, clouding their judgment, reducing their thoughts and awareness to mush. The unstoppable push from the clone army was enough to crush the little morale the Jedi had inside their own home. Vader marched his way out of the Great Hall and to the elevator that led to the council chambers. He hadn't encountered any younglings as of yet, but with the 2 largest threats in the temple dealt with, he might as well make sure there was no council members hiding. He pressed the button on the elevator and felt his stomach drop as the lift pulled him towards the sky. He exited shortly after and walked towards the door, with strength and power. Using the Force, the doors opened, and he looked in. He could sense something, but nothing dangerous, and then out from behind the chairs came children. He didn't even see them upon entering the chambers. They were so helpless and fragile. He looked at them as the lead child walked forward and called him Master Skywalker, telling him that there were too many clones and they didn't know what to do. Anakin held his lightsaber for a moment, and his finger hovered over the ignition switch. He then felt that same call from before, when it felt like Padme was reaching out through the Force before he went to the executive building. Padme was watching the temple become engulfed in flames, and she was learning that Anakin had gone back to the temple. She was facing waves of fear, anxiety, and sadness, not wanting to lose Anakin, but also fearful of what would become of her friends, many of which were Jedi. This took Anakin's mind away from the moment before he returned and looked down at the younglings and reconsidered everything. When he came to the temple, the thought of killing younglings never crossed his mind. He was only thinking about the corruption of the council, their arrogance for not gifting him the little title of master on a silver platter like he deserved it. A wave of fear crawled across his body, and following that wave of fear was disappointment mixed with tremors of disgust. The words playing over and again in his mind, what the youngling said to him. Maybe he never got it before, maybe he never understood, but many of the younglings in the temple looked up to him. They all respected him and truthfully wanted to be like him. Yet he just marched through half the temple killing people that were never his enemies. Shocked, he was never his enemy. Hell, not even Mace Windu was his enemy. These Jedi may have been corrupt in their own way, but it did not make them evil. It did not mean they stood against justice or peace or light. It meant that, as sentients, just as him, they were flawed. Skywalker then looked at the child, who stepped forward again, begging the question. Anakin was about to be a father, and what sort of example would he set for that child? Whether it be a boy or a girl, he did not know. But what kind of person would they see him as? A murderer? Someone who took pride in killing children, priests, teachers, students, and everything in between? Not a single one of the Jedi he killed today was a warrior. Shock Teen Syndralic may have been trained to a higher extent, but it did not make them warriors. He was about to come here and kill these younglings, the same ones that looked up to him in awe as he walked through the hallways, the ones who bantered about becoming Anakin's next student, the children that aspired to be like him, and if not to be like him, then to lead like him or inspire like him. An entire generation of Jedi saw him as a premier Jedi in the Order, and to disregard all of that for a false sense of security didn't do him any good. The words cycling through his mind as the youngling stood there silently, watching Anakin's mind at work. The lightsaber in his hand fell out of it, and it dropped to the ground. The youngling in front stepped back, and Anakin thought about everything. If Palpatine was the Sith Lord, that meant he was the one to put bounties out on Padme. It meant that he was the one who ordered Cad Bane to the Senate building, or the man who sent Padme to the front of the Malevolence during its destruction. The same person who encouraged that she be placed in a more dangerous situation so that she could be killed, and instead of finding a sense of peace with the younglings, his sorrow turned to rage. He looked down at the children before telling them that he was sorry for everything. They didn't understand. They didn't see what he did, Skywalker thought, strategized, and then moved on. He told them to stay here. He would make things right, turning to the door, pulling his lightsaber, and stepping out, closing the door behind him. He called out to Commander Oppo, informing him that there was a massive route heading towards the great chasm that led all the way down to the surface of the planet. He told Oppo to reroute every single clone trooper there immediately. Oppo did respond to this, believing it was an unsound strategy, to which Anakin immediately informed him that any Jedi in the temple would be there anyways. If they continued to stall, playing this little game of back and forth, then the Jedi would be able to return with massive numbers and seek revenge. Oppo's failure to follow his orders would cost the Republic severely. Oppo immediately snapped back with a quick yes sir, before gathering the men to move away from the temple. The chaos of the new orders forced a lot of clones to get killed in the crossfire. This action also cost the life of Grand Inquisitor, who was doing a phenomenal job, until all the chaos around him disappeared and he had to make do without the element of surprise, which didn't do him too well. Anakin didn't really know if anyone saw him killing other Jedi, so he believed it would be best if he escaped the temple without being seen by anyone else. So that's what he did. He made his escape discreet. Inside the Jedi Temple, the Jedi were fending off the little pockets of clone troopers, but for the most part, the Jedi had won the day, and it was because of Anakin's rerouting orders. However, the few remaining Jedi Masters were trying to figure out how the clones were leaving lightsaber marks on dead Jedi. That's the one thing that didn't make sense. Of course, Grand Inquisitor was accounted for, but he was never seen away from where he ambushed his brothers and sisters. As the Jedi continued searching throughout the hollow recordings of the events inside the temple, Anakin made his way to the executive building. His hope was that he could fix it all. One final chance to make things right and potentially bring balance to the Force. And the further he got from the temple, the more everything confused him. The boy from the council chambers looked just like him when he was a boy. He would have literally been killing himself inside the chambers. He just didn't realize how he could have fallen so far away from the code or the Jedi or whatever. The children were never aware that he was there to kill them, and Anakin wanted to keep it that way. So many of the younglings looked up to him, and now he'd have to undo everything he did. Thousands of thoughts crossed his mind at the moment. The disappointment from those he looked up to, the disgust Padme would likely have, the wrath of surviving the council. What might follow would potentially be worse of an outcome for him, but he couldn't do what he nearly did. That would cost him everything he was. If he threw himself away, then what was the point of living life? If it was under the guise of a man that wasn't Anakin Skywalker, then he wouldn't be living. The lights would be on, but no one would be home. Though with each passing thought, as his vessel sped across the city, he came to one conclusion. He knew what would come from this conclusion too: the death of Sidious. Skywalker landed on the docks and walked into the executive building. He moved with force, his robes flying behind in the wind as he sped towards the Chancellor's office. When he arrived, he saw Sidious sitting in his chair. The bodies of the dead Jedi hadn't been removed yet. Sidious asked Anakin why he was here, and Skywalker told him that he was here to bring an end to him and to his rule. The Dark Lord twisted his head with a smile, asking him if he really thought that'd be a bright idea. Anakin steadied himself. He didn't see Palpatine's fury. He saw that Windu was beating him when he arrived. Anakin didn't doubt Windu's strength, but he also didn't think Palpatine was all that strong either. Sidious told Skywalker that the resist the darkness would be falling into weakness, forcing him to not just lose his power, but his wife Padme. He rose to his feet with a joyous grin covering his face, as he asked Skywalker if that's what he really wanted for himself. Anakin stood with a strong presence, and then thoughts crept back into his mind. He was making a mistake. He should have killed the Younglings, and then he came back to his rationale. Palpatine never wanted Padme alive. She was the opposition to his power. He tried to get her killed a number of times during the war because of that. Anakin told Sidious that he figured him out, and now he'd pay for trying to have Padme killed by Dooku all those times during the war. Palpatine smiled. It didn't matter. Truthfully, the deed was done. While he was unaware of the 501st being rerouted from the Jedi Temple, the most dangerous Jedi in the galaxy were all dead. Palpatine, once he learned of the situation in the temple, could very easily go to the temple himself and clean the floor with the survivors. It would be too easy. But first remained his last challenge, if you could even call it a challenge. Anakin ignited his lightsaber, and without hesitation, Sidious's lightsaber ignited from behind Anakin. He ducked out of the way, as the blade ripped out of the vase and sped into Sidious's hand. Without a second to react, Sidious leapt across the room, forcing Anakin to turn all the way back around and block the strike from Sidious. They slammed their blades together, and Anakin was shocked at the force of the hit. He thrusted his blade forward, and their duel began. The masterful Dark Lord of the Sith had no intention to win super easily. He wanted to play with his food, just like he did with Maul and Savage on Mandalore. He knew that Anakin, at this point, was no match for him. The only challenge was a master like Windu or Yoda, and that was an insult coming from Sidious. Their blades sped together. Sidious, having watched Anakin over the years and seeing where his strengths were, knew him all too well. While he may have been physically stronger than Palpatine, the Sith Lord was much stronger in the Force at this moment in time. There would be little resistance that Anakin could provide against a master of the dark side. Anakin had never fought so fast before, but he was keeping pace with Sidious. In his mind, he thought Sidious was keeping pace with him, which surprised him. The two of them continued their duel and slammed their blades together. Palpatine wasn't even leaping off of furniture. He was going in at a straight fight, which did everything he wanted it to do. Anakin did a sweet move, dropping his lightsaber and catching it in another hand before driving it forward. Sidious loved this move. Anakin used it against Dooku, and he knew the moment it would come and how he would use it against Anakin. Sidious pulled Anakin's hand backwards before blasting him in the face with a handful of lightning. Anakin slipped, stepping backwards awkwardly, trying to see him, his fury blinding his ability to feel through the Force and trust it as his ally. Anakin blocked what he could until he felt a searing pain across his stomach, before a boot was placed on his chest and he was kicked backwards. Sidious walked over and stood over Anakin, telling him that he wasn't going to die. First, he'd watched the entire galaxy slip into an era of the Empire. He'd watch his wife die, and then he'd watch their child become a servant of him. Sidious shot electricity into Anakin's body, burning him all the sorts as he cried out in agony. When Sidious stopped, his smile faded, and he told Anakin that after he watched all of that, he would have his permission to die. He was such a waste of good talent, too, which made the entire ordeal all the more disappointing for him. Sidious called to his royal guards, and they came in, locking Anakin's wrists together and throwing him into the corner of the room. Sidious took Anakin's blade and placed it on his desk. Anakin was left on his knees in the corner of the room, forced to hold himself up with a wound covering his entire abdomen. Hours would pass by, but it felt like a lifetime. Sidious learned of the Jedi escaping the temple, and then realized that it was due to Anakin's actions that they were able to escape. This did piss him off, but truthfully, Sidious liked this idea much more than his own. While Grand Inquisitor was dead, his sacrifice would be the beginning of the end of the Jedi. Many of them would feel lost, and many of them would feel called to join the darkness. With around 1,000 or so survivors, there was an army of Sith waiting to be built. He would give them their hope for survival, and then he would give them the death they deserved. It wouldn't be too difficult either. At the same time, Palpatine called for an emergency session inside the Senate building, though he noticed that Representative Banks was filling in for Senator Amidala. How odd. He hadn't sent for death squads to kill her yet. As it turns out, the stress of the event forced her into labor, which had 3PO taking her across the city to be taken care of. This was extremely beneficial, because despite the fear and stress, she was sleeping, due to being jacked up on medication. She was awake for the birthing process and was put immediately back to sleep. The medical droids did it because if they didn't put her to sleep, she could overwhelm her nervous system and potentially cause herself to die. It was a benefit of using Coruscant medical droids opposed to anywhere else in the galaxy. Inside the temple, Yoda and Obi-Wan were searching for survivors. Luckily, there were very rare incidents of younglings having been killed. A majority of them escaped, and thanks to Anakin's actions, 1,000 or so Jedi were able to escape the wrath of the 501st, who were still waiting for Jedi to appear at the Great Hole on Coruscant. and because Skywalker wasn't responding, the clones couldn't leave, and Sidious didn't reroute them. As their general, he had to issue out orders to them, and Commander Appu, aside from his little outburst during nightfall, wasn't going to try and break those orders. He followed his orders well, so he would wait until he was given new ones from Skywalker or Palpatine. Obi-Wan and Yoda then found a hollow recording that was hard to access but inside the Jedi archives. It was a master security level clearance. It explained what happened and the little the Jedi knew of everything that happened the night before. It was explained that few Jedi saw Master Skywalker fighting against the Jedi, but other Jedi didn't see him. There were hollow recordings showing him killing Sindralik and his 2 Padawans, but aside from that, there were no other recordings of him inside the Jedi Temple. The Master then continued and told them that they were relocating to a planet far from the core, going to Lothal to bunker down and hide. This particular Master was an archivist with Master Jocasta, so he knew of former Jedi homeworlds, and Lothal was one of them, and the one he wanted to go to. It was far away, and it should be safe from the Republic. With that knowledge, Yoda told Obi-Wan to go and find Skywalker. Obi-Wan didn't want to kill Anakin, but he listened to what Yoda had to say and began to search for Skywalker. It would lead him to nowhere. Padme wasn't in her apartment, and according to 3PO, they were under the assumption that he died inside the temple. Obi-Wan was grateful for this information because now he knew that he would be joining Yoda. It was the only lead he had. Though Obi-Wan wouldn't actually be joining Yoda, instead he would walk into the Chancellor's office inside the executive building, which is where Palpatine was. Yoda, on the other hand, was inside the Senate building. Obi-Wan stepped in. He could see Anakin kneeling with a wound across his abdomen, the royal guards holding his shoulders so that he wouldn't slump over. How pitiful. Obi-Wan then realized that perhaps it was a lie, and perhaps what he saw was a manipulation or a curse put into Anakin, as if he wasn't in control of himself when it all happened at nightfall. Obi-Wan looked at Sidious. He knew that the other Jedi had failed, and he'd have to rise to this occasion. He told Sidious it was over. Anakin looked up with hope in his eyes before Sidious threw Obi-Wan into the wall behind him. The Dark Lord laughed, standing as he had before. Obi-Wan, much like against Dooku, was outmatched in the Force. However, he might stand a chance in a duel with the blade. Dooku was a superior duelist than pretty much anyone alive in this era, only bested by Skywalker during the weakest part of his adult life. Obi-Wan ignited his blade, and Sidious smiled, nodding his head with an arrogance, telling Obi-Wan he would die as a fool. Kenobi shot back, telling Sidious that the legacy of the Sith ended here. The moment the words left his mouth, Sidious was across the room, thrusting his blade forward, as Kenobi backed away, blocking. Despite having a much weaker force than Sidious, Obi-Wan's mastery in Form 3 meant he could do this all day, and he would. The two duelists marched the length of the room, while Skywalker watched. He was so amazed by Obi-Wan's proficiency. He was unstoppable. He blocked everything, the thrusts, the drags, the power strikes, everything. He stepped back and allowed Sidious to force his way forward. Kenobi did his best to avoid slipping into the trap of the Sith, because Sidious left himself open intentionally, a lot of times too. Of course, he wasn't actually open, he was just giving Obi-Wan a target and hoping he would bite. But Obi-Wan wouldn't. He was just realizing that Yoda was right about Sidious being far too powerful for him. It was a matter of time until Sidious landed the strike right where he needed to. Obi-Wan backed off again, and Sidious chased. The room was electric, two duelists at their best physical form, fighting off in a fight to decide the fate of the galaxy. Obi-Wan may have been masterful in defense, but Sidious was masterful in every form, and so as the fight started to even out, he played the game with Kenobi. He moved into Dooku's main form, utilizing the precision and speed from Form 2, which countered Obi-Wan's Form 3 expertly. And as Obi-Wan felt his grip slipping, he moved into Form 4 to counter as best he could, which thanks to Qui-Gon's training, it worked. Not for long, but long enough. Obi-Wan moved his blade forward with aggression, matching Sidious's attacks and pushing him back. Obi-Wan's youth in comparison aided him here, but the second he threw his blades forward, he revealed a weakness, one that Sidious quickly moved to intercept. Kenobi felt pain cover his dominant forearm, as it was ripped off and Sidious kicked Obi-Wan backwards into the wall. He brought his blade up to strike Obi-Wan down before Sidious himself was launched across the room. Grandmaster Yoda stepped into the room to save those who were here. He saw Anakin in the corner and realized that he wasn't a threat. Sidious stood up and spun his blade around before launching himself at Yoda. There was no time for pleasantries, not even that Yoda had any intention in beginning them. Their blades clashed together at remarkable speeds, and the Jedi Grand Master matched every move made by Sidious. While Palpatine may have had an age advantage on Skywalker and Kenobi, he didn't have it against the Jedi Master who lived 8 more lifetimes than Sidious did. Their duel was remarkable, as it was tense. The two avatars of light and dark fought to the death. Yoda's speed was unlike anything Anakin or Obi-Wan had ever seen. Every time they ever saw him fight in a spar, he wasn't moving nearly as fast, and he looked unstoppable in the moment. Sidious was able to match every move. but there was nowhere for him to escape to. The room felt like it was shrinking because despite how small in stature Yoda was, his power was immense and he made himself feel larger than life. For moving so elderly daily, he made the speed of light look slow. Sidious had only a few chances to get himself out of this, but each time he tried, he lost his little advantage as it began slipping further and further away from him. Yoda saw it, and then he used the Force to throw Sidious into the ceiling. The move blindsided the Dark Lord as Yoda threw his lightsaber upwards and it cut through the Sith Lord, killing him instantly. Yoda released his grip and then threw the 2 royal guards into the wall, knocking them out, letting them drop next to Skywalker. Yoda turned to Obi-Wan first, to make sure he was alright. Anakin, on the other hand, fell flat on his face. He had no more strength on his abdomen. After it was sliced open, he was forced to sit upright for more than 12 hours. His skin and muscles burned unlike ever before, and he had no strength to continue holding himself up. Obi-Wan was in a lot of pain. Losing a forearm does that to you. But he was more worried about Anakin as he got up and started over towards his former student. He called out Anakin's name, asking if he was alright, and Skywalker twisted a little bit and nodded his head in a way. He wasn't, but he was hoping that they didn't see or hear anything from the temple. They did. Yoda stepped in front of Obi-Wan, knowing that he'd be much quicker to forgive due to the bond of master and apprentice. Yoda asked Skywalker about what he did and why he did it. Anakin knew he was caught, so he explained himself, his line of thinking, his realization, and how he knew he was wrong. This was met with mixed reactions from both Obi-Wan and Yoda. Kenobi wasn't immediately ready to forgive, but he was more willing to move forward. Anakin did kill Jedi, but he didn't kill hundreds, close to around 40, which wasn't good, and he wasn't pretending that it was good, but he made the right choice in the end, without being forced to. That was the big thing for Obi-Wan. It was the fact that Anakin still came around to being a good person. He saw that he was wrong, and he accepted that he was wrong. He tried to right his wrongs even better, which was better than pushing himself further along the dark path, which, truthfully, Obi-Wan found more likely than the current scenario. Yoda was not as quick to see the side of things. He could see that it was only 40 Jedi, but those 40 Jedi didn't deserve to die. Neither did the thousands across the galaxy, and while the Jedi had been manipulated, it was more so the externalization of Yoda's resentment for himself and his own failure, rather than Anakin's failure. Yoda lost his entire Jedi Order, and some blame could go to Anakin, actually a lot more than they knew could, being that Anakin cut off Windu's hand after he defeated Sidious. All of this could have been prevented, but Anakin wasn't going to disclose that because he didn't think about it. Yoda, despite his feelings on Anakin in the moment, knew that his wounds would probably be lethal, due to them not being taken care of for so long, so he walked himself over to Anakin and placed his small hand on Skywalker's stomach. He closed his eyes and then felt through the Force, calling upon one of the older lessons that hadn't been used in centuries, healing Skywalker's wounds. Yoda stood up and looked away, telling Kenobi they needed to leave. He then turned to Anakin and told him that as Jedi they were meant to forgive. As Jedi they were meant to not seek revenge. However, there were 1,000 survivors, all of which were traumatized from the actions inside the temple. It was never conveyed by Anakin that he called the order to remove the clones, but he didn't want to say anything about it now. Yoda told Anakin to not follow them. It'd be best until the time was right. Yoda walked away and Obi-Wan went to Anakin's side, telling him where Padme was and wishing the best for him, regardless of his own feelings surrounding the forgiveness that was to come. A year passed since the fall of the Republic. Anakin still hadn't seen signs of Obi-Wan, Yoda, or the rest of the Jedi. They had no communication. Anakin was living with Padme, and Ahsoka had full reign over the guest bedroom. Senator Amidala had become Chancellor when the plot was revealed about Palpatine. Because the Jedi were gone from the equation, it was much easier for the Senate to digest. They saw her as a potential future, especially since she was always against Palpatine during his rule, as if she could see his turn coming. Her reign as Chancellor started with her becoming Emperor, and then denouncing such a role and ripping up the foundation for the Empire. The clones were used to break through the Kaminoan files, which revealed everything the Senate needed to know. And while it slowly became public knowledge that Padme was with Anakin, it didn't dissuade the public from trusting her, simply because she always was capable of putting her job before the love of her life. The Jedi weren't necessarily given amnesty, but the public believed Order 66 was too far, so it was revoked. Because Chancellor Amidala was the leading face of the Republic, Anakin was raising Luke and Leia for a good part of time. Padme was working with former Separatists who turned their backs on the Separatist Council, though that didn't happen until knowledge of Palpatine and Dooku's plans became public knowledge, which meant that even after decisive losses at Felucia, Caden and Modi, at Boz Pity, Kashyyyk, Megiddo, and a number of other battles, they still continued to fight. But it came to an end months later. Anakin was loving his life, though it wasn't perfect per se. He still had to live with the guilt of his actions of which had Padme strongly suggesting that he seek help, which he did. To raise 2 children after being a part of the genocide on the Jedi, as it was being called now, wasn't the best look for him as a father. Ahsoka was supportive of him, and she, being his friend through all of this entire ordeal, was perfect for him. She wasn't always in the apartment, but she did sleep there. Ahsoka's adventure was outwards. The Jedi, on the other hand, were responsible for the death of Maul. Tremors became apparent in the chaos that followed the death of Palpatine, and these tremors led to Obi-Wan confronting Maul with a robotic arm. The death of Maul would rip the foundation of Crimson Dawn apart, and they would very quickly turn on each other. The clones would continue to serve as a grand army of the Republic, and with Padme and Senator Chuchi, they would be taken care of. After having spent the year away from the Jedi, Anakin went to Lothal, where he would find them. It would be a hard process. None of the younglings knew what he was responsible for, but the adults did. They weren't nearly as receptive, and truthfully, a lot was missed in the last year. Many of these masters and knights called for a hunting down of Anakin Skywalker and killing him. Obi-Wan had to be removed from the discussions because of how close he was to Anakin, and Yoda nearly lost his order because of it. There were a lot of very upset Jedi, but they had to be reminded of the code they swore allegiance to, and to rise above their sentient desire for revenge. It wouldn't be right, it would destroy their order if they had succumbed to the darkness left behind by the Clone Wars. Yoda nearly lost his order, but he was able to bring it back. Not to his prime era like it was before he became Grand Master, but enough. Enough so that he could step down and hand the reins off to another. The Jedi accepted Anakin's apologies and they made up for what had been done. The damage was something that couldn't be undone, but how individuals within the collective responded determined the future for those not yet born or brought into the Order. Anakin and Ahsoka would open up a garage shop on Coruscant, one that would turn from a small business into a monopoly of mechanics and workers across the massive city planet. It was very profitable, but it wasn't about profit. It was about being happy, which being a mechanic made both of them happy. Luke and Leia would grow up in this galaxy, a galaxy without war, one where their mother united two broken parties and ended the war that raged on for months after their births. They would grow up with a full family, and even receive visits from Kenobi and Yoda over the years, seeing them as Anakin's side of the family, while they would also be able to retire to Naboo for the countryside retreats and vacations. Anakin would always be haunted by his actions, but his resolution, and how determined he was to find it, would inspire not just himself, but those closest to him for the rest of his life. And that, my friends, is our story. Again, special thanks to Galvin Gaming, Tristan, Mandalore, Sir William, 1767, Darth Revan, Granddaddy Bane, Colin Rooney, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Weewoo 670, Anakin Stank Runner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Oz of Oz, Darth Nox, The Eternal Padawan, Joshua Tem, Johnny Naguin, Sansa Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Calic, Mammoth Studios, Anakin 003, Lord Draken, 4060 Star Wars, Airbus, Rex the Wolf, The Matthew First Names, Dark Saint 46, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing for supporting the channel. Smash that like button. If you want to support me in those ways, go check out the Patreon. Sith Lord and animations on there. Gonna be bringing them out really soon. Otherwise, let's plot the story real quick. The idea of the younglings turning Anakin actually makes a lot of sense in a way, because like he's gonna be a father. Killing kids doesn't really seem too father-like, you know? So I thought it'd be a cool way to do it, but I also didn't want it to just be like they said something to him that made him turn. I think I wanted it to be like a combination of things of him realizing in that moment while he was there. And then I wanted him to fight Sidious, but also not beat Sidious. I don't think at that state he could beat Sidious. I think Sidious would just be able to take advantage of him, just because he's not mentally present in a way like Mustafar, but I think the inverse of that, where he's coming back to the light, but he's still got that darkness in him, and I think he would lose. And so yeah, I don't really have much else to say about this. Fun video. Hope you all enjoyed. I love you all. Spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.